I rise today to set the record straight on the President's border wall. Quite frankly, something he didn't talk about much last night during his speech to the country, but the truth is, this is where the problem is. And so I want to talk about it a little bit today. The President made it crystal clear dozens of times, in fact, that he was prepared to shut the government down in order to get the $5.7 billion for the wall. Leading up to that speech last night. So here we are today, day 19 of President Trump's shutdown. Political gamesmanship. Well, that's nothing new in Washington, D.C. But the fact is our debates need to be grounded in facts. So here are the facts. The President's demand for $5.7 billion for a border wall is tall on hyperbole and wide on theatrics, but short on facts. The President last night said that Congress has refused to provide the resources needed to secure the border. That is not true. In fiscal year 2018, Congress gave the President $1.3 billion to construct fencing and other fixed structures along the southern border. I know so because I worked side by side with my Republican colleagues to write that bill. Today, not one of those projects is under construction, not one. Strong border security is much more than physical barriers. Congress appropriated $21 billion for immigration enforcement and border security in last year's Homeland Security Appropriations Act. That includes money to expand manpower, increase technology, and utilize communication services and resources, on top of funding for physical barriers. Here's another fact. Hard narcotics like meth and cocaine and opioids are not coming over the border in backpacks. They're coming through our ports in cars and trucks. We have the technology to fix that. So let's appropriate the money towards real solutions at our ports to stop the drugs from entering our country, not the $5.7 billion for a wall. So again, let's stick to the facts. Despite having more than $21 billion in border security and immigration enforcement funding, including funds for physical barriers, the President has shut down the government to demand another $5.7 billion exclusively for a wall. One would think to ask, what would you possibly spend $5.7 billion on? Especially after already having $21 billion to spend on border security and immigration enforcement. And we did ask him that. We asked him for a plan. We told the President and Homeland Security Secretary Nielsen that if they're going to break their promise to have Mexico pay for the wall and use American taxpayer dollars, they ought to produce a plan of action. The plan that we received in late December was incomplete. No analysis of alternative technologies, no analysis on the impact to communities, to landowners, to wildlife. And that plan only asked for $1.6 billion, not the $5.7 billion that the President is now demanding. The President has also failed to address private property rights and eminent domain. What is he going to do if a family refuses to sell off wide tracts of their farm or ranch, to allow a wall to go through and split their ranch, divide their ranch? Are families going to cede their water and mineral rights? Is the administration prepared to enter into good faith negotiations with literally thousands of families? And do we know how much that is going to cost the American taxpayer? These questions need answers. Yet with these questions still unanswered, there are folks in this body, the United States Senate, who are prepared to write a $5.7 billion check to the President right now. So here we are, on day 19 of the President's shutdown. During the President's speech last night, he was right about one thing. There is a crisis taking shape in our country. But it is not the crisis on the southern border that he's trying to manufacture. As a result of the President's shutdown, there are 19,000 border agents today who are working without pay. There are 51,000 TSA agents working without pay. These are hardworking folks. They have families, they have mortgages, and they're being forced by the President to secure our country's borders and ports and airports while not knowing when their next paycheck will arrive. I've heard from Border Patrol agents who moved across the country at their own expense so that they could be stationed along Montana's northern border. How have they been repaid for their willingness to serve? Well, they're not being paid. Not only do they have to absorb the moving costs, but now they have to pay for rent and cover other essential costs without a paycheck. And they are continually wondering when they will get paid next. Look, at the end of last year, CBP's recruitment efforts finally started to bear fruit. For the first time in years, CBP began to achieve gains in hiring border agents. This shutdown not only could, but I believe it will set back those efforts dramatically. Who could blame a family for passing on a job that could force you to work for free? The President talked last night of a sacred duty to America. I can think of few things more un-American than withholding pay for someone for an honest day's work. But it is not those just stationed at the border and at our airports who are hurting because of the President's shutdown. I'm going to give you a small sample of letters and emails that I've received since the shutdown began from the folks from the great state of Montana. Ronald from western Montana says this: I spoke to my son, a career Coast Guard member. He tells me that the Coast Guard is being directed to continue their duties without being paid due to this ridiculous shutdown. He writes to me, Senator, that is not right. Why do these brave men and women have to continue to risk their lives without being paid? My boy is worried about being evicted from his apartment with 2 young daughters and a wife because they won't receive their housing allowance. Please help fix this un-American situation. Shiloh from Bozeman writes, I and other federal employees have been converted into political footballs for partisan politics. My Christmas vacation was canceled and pay has been suspended during a time when some of us need the money the most. We are being disadvantaged and made to suffer, while the comfortable and other folks are unaffected and cling to their arbitrary political ideologies and refuse to compromise. Darren from northeastern Montana, I have a farm equipment loan that is a standstill because the USDA is not picking up the phone. I have contractors and vendors who are waiting to be paid. The impact of this shutdown will last long after it ends. Deborah from Indian Country. My daughters are federal employees, proudly serving the Northern Cheyenne tribe in Montana through the Indian Health Service. My daughters are both enrolled members of the Northern Cheyenne tribe, and both are single, hardworking mothers. My granddaughters are afraid their moms won't be able to pay the bills or buy the groceries if the paycheck doesn't arrive. Morale is horrid in Lame Deer. Please stop this immoral shutdown. It is very unfair to hardworking people like my daughters. They must work but will not get a paycheck this Friday if the shutdown continues. Mr. President, this is what a crisis looks like. And this is a crisis that you have created. The President barely mentioned the wall last night in his address to the nation, yet we are here on day 19 of a government shutdown that is a direct result of his wish to build a wall from sea the shining sea. It is time for the Senate to be the Senate. It is time for the folks in this body to quit making decisions based on politics and start making them based on facts. And the facts in this case are clear. There is no plan for $5.7 billion for a border wall. Mexico will not pay for it. And the dysfunction of this administration is causing real turmoil in the lives of 800,000 workers and their families. I'm calling on the majority to bring some common sense to this situation and to stand behind the bipartisan legislation that Republicans and Democrats have passed over the last several months, over last month in particular, to reopen the government and put an end to this crisis.